everyone, join me today as I paint these 5 lollipops in watercolor. I'm going to start with my pencil sketch already on the page. You can find the link to the free traceable sketch reference in the description box below. This tutorial and all of its sketches and pictures of the final sketch can be found on my Patreon channel. You can join as a free member and have access to all of these references and video. I'm going to use my kneaded eraser now, and I'm just going to roll it over the pencil sketch to lift up some of the graphite of the pencils so that as little of it shows in my final sketch as possible. This process just lifts up the excess graphite that's sitting on the top of the page, and after I've done that, if I want to lighten any more, I'll just rub the eraser over. Particularly this middle one, which I know is going to be the yellow lolly. I don't want really any pencil to be showing, so I'm just going to erase that the most. I will spray my colors now to activate them. I'm going to start working on each of the lollies individually, and I'm going to start by doing a very, very light watery glaze over each of them to be the lightest base color that I'm going to want to show through. So that is what I'm going to start by doing, and I think because of the nature of yellow, and we know that I just don't want my brush to be tinted really at all, I'm going to start with the yellow one, which is the center one, and I'm going to pick up maybe I'll do lemon yellow and then add the other yellow as my second layer. So with lemon yellow, I'm going to water it down so it is really the majority water and the slightest bit of pigment in it. And I'm just going to rub that. You see, even that I think is a little bit too dark. I'm going to add some water to that. And I really want the lightest shade of yellow here, because this is going to be the highlight color that shows through from underneath. So I really want really very little color here at all. I'm even going to lift some of that. I really want very, very little yellow. My highlight area is going to be here on the right, so that's the area of most concern. It doesn't really matter if it gets darker on the bottom or the left because we're going to paint over that. But really here on the right, I want the least amount showing through. That's fine. Alright, I'm going to start on the left now. The left one is going to be red. So on this Mungyo palette, I'm going to use permanent red. Maybe I'm going to keep them in order here. So this will be red and this will be the orange. Tiny, tiny little bits of red that I'll lay down here. This brush I'm using is a number 2 brush, so it is very nice for detailed work like this. Alright, in the next one I'm going to make that orange. Taking that orange, watering it down, I'm going to cover the whole thing. This one will be green. I'm going to use Sap Green. And the next one will be blue. I think I'm going to use Cobalt Blue for that. And I'm just adding some water and spreading this further. I'm going to let these layers dry completely now so that they don't interfere with my additional layers. So let this dry completely and I will see you in the next layer. That layer is completely dry now, and before I continue, I'm just going to try and erase some of the border lines on some of the lollies now that I've got a base color there. I'm not going to do too much along the middle, maybe a little bit, but there will be shadow there. But on the outside, I'm just trying to get rid of any excess pencil. Any graphite that is underneath the watercolor that I've already laid down won't be able to erase, but if there's anything that is extending outside, it will erase. Now in this layer, I'm going to work wet on dry. So I'm going to try and preserve the highlight areas by simply not painting on the areas that I want to bounce forward as a highlight. So I'm going to mix up my same colors in a slightly thicker consistency than I did in the first layer, and then just map out on each the highlight areas. I'm going to make the highlight areas similar on each so that it shows the light coming from the right hand side, but not absolutely identical because the shape of the spheres will be slightly different in each case. So that red on my palette has dried, so I'm not going to add to it. I'm just going to pick it up with a little bit of water on my brush. Maybe I should mix up just a little bit more, so I've got enough. This is still not the darkest it's going to get. I am going to do a shadow layer in the next layer. So maybe have a look at what I do first and then copy after. So I'm going to paint around what is going to be the highlight. Right, let's start with that, and now the whole top area I'm going to fill in on the left of that. I'm going to leave the slightest bit of highlight just along the top here because maybe the rim of this area will catch the light. And also maybe a bit of the bottom on the right hand side I will leave. Alright, then underneath I'm going to leave that little bit of the rim. And the slightest bit there, I might put a shadow there or something later. I'm just keeping a separation. Okay, I'm going to do a similar thing for the orange now, keeping roughly the same sort of shape, just slightly different. I guess with the bumpiness of the gold press paper, no two will ever be the same anyway, but anyway, I'm trying to make them not identical. Next up I'll do the yellow. I had used the lemon yellow in the first layer. Now I'm going to change and just use normal yellow. So this is a little bit warmer. Now I will take that sap green . and lastly the Cobalt Blue. Before I do the next layer on the lollies, I want to do a little bit of work on each of the sticks, and I want to keep this light and vibrant and fun. So I want to use a lighter color to do my shadows, and for that I think I'm going to use indigo rather than a gray color. So I'm just going to put some indigo in here to prepare it for my shadow color. And I think what I'll do is I will use two brushes because I don't want a lot of color to go down, so that I can get a three-dimensional layer look to the stick here. I'm going to put the water down with my size 2 brush, and then so that I don't pick up too much pigment because it's such a thin stick, I'm going to use my 00 to pick up the pigment and put it just down the left hand side of each stick. Anyway, I'm going to give that a go on the first one and see if it works out. So I want to work wet and wet so I get a bit of a blending. I'm going to put water down first. I don't want too much water because if I do, the color is just going to blend the whole way across the water that I put down. I just want enough water that there's not a solid line when I put the shadow color down, but I don't want it pooling. I just want it glistening. So I'll put that water down, and then let me with my 00 brush pick up some pigment and drop it in down the left hand side. That's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. And maybe what I will do is, there's still a little bit of pigment on my brush there. I'll just run it down a little bit to the right to encourage a bit more blending. And maybe a little bit of shadow just underneath the lolly, because it would cast a bit of a shadow on the stick itself. Alright, I'm going to let it dry and I'll see if I need to add anything in an additional layer, but that might be fine. Alright, let me try and fix up this orange as best I can. I've got it on my hand. I'm just going to put water and see if I can lift it. I don't think this is lifting. I think it is going to be what it is, unfortunately. I might just have to go over this area with a bit of white after the whole thing is finished. I'm not going to lose any more sleep about that. No use crying over spilt milk. Alright, so I'm going to go and repeat exactly the same process on all 5 sticks. I like the shape that everything is starting to take now that everything is dry. I want to now increase the depth of the darkest colors. That means I want to add more of a darker shadow on the left hand side of each of the lollies. Without using a shadow color, I'm going to see if I can get away with just using a darker version of the colors that I'm already working with, just because I don't really want to have to use a shadow color and dull down what is such a fun sketch in the first place. So I'll see if I can do that. If I've got to add in more of a shadow color in an additional layer, I will. So I'm avoiding the very light areas that I had already reserved as highlights in the additional layer. I don't plan to go very close to them either, but I'm just going to put some water down on the darker area. Then I'm going to take this red in a thicker consistency. I really want it quite thick now so that it can behave as my shadow color. And I'm going to drop that in using my number 2 brush on the left hand side here. Then I've still got quite a bit of pigment there. I'm just going to tap that off. And now I'm just going to encourage some blending. And you can see already that by adding this darker color, it's helping to exaggerate the roundness of the lolly. And I'm just stippling with my brush a bit here to get a bit of a texture. Alright, I'm happy with that. Maybe I'll just put a little bit more down here. Alright, now I'm going to do the same for the other lollies. Maybe for the orange, what I'll do now, because I've got it available, there is the Scarlet color, which might work as a nice shadow color for the orange. Maybe it's a little bit red. I'll add some Vermillion in with it. Yeah, I think that'll work nicely. Alright, so I'm being quite conservative just because it's a much darker color than I used initially. And I'm just stippling into the center here. Alright, let me just do a bit of blending and then I'm going to concentrate the darker area more. Seem to have a hair there. It's not shifting. Alright, let me drop in on the darker area. Starting to dry a bit. I'm going to go back and just add some orange sort of in between in a thicker consistency. With the yellow, I do have access to this yellow-orange color as maybe a slightly darker tint. But I'll start with the yellow in a thicker consistency first, and maybe I'll put the yellow-orange along the edge. I've put a bit too much water here. I'm just lifting it. Yellow is quite a difficult one to get darker without actually changing to an entirely different color. But anyway, let's see what I can do with this yellow in quite a thick consistency. See, it's changing it a little bit, but really not significantly. So let me take the yellow-orange now. I'm just going to mix it with that yellow. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Alright, same thing with the green. What have I got available? I've got the Sap Green that I used already. And maybe I'll start with that and then add some Hooker's Green to make it a little bit darker. Let's see how we go. Yeah, that is quite a lot different to what I've got down. Maybe I won't need to go darker. Let's see. Right, let me just blend it here. Again, I'm just stippling to try and get a little bit of texture in if I can. And me doing this is also drying it slightly, so anything that I put down is not going to blend so far. In essence, I'm just pushing this back a little bit to get more of a blending gradient. Alright, I'm going to try and go with the Sap Green in a thick consistency now, and I'm just going to drop it in along the far left. And maybe I'll do a tiniest bit of Hooker's Green just along the very far left. Let's see. Yeah, that helps to always increase that contrast, remember? Getting a bigger distance between our darkest darks and our lightest lights. And lastly, I'll do the blue. I'm sticking initially with the same Cobalt Blue, just in a thicker consistency. And then I'll stipple it here a bit on the right. Alright, let's just add the same color in a thicker consistency still. Alright, I think that's looking good and way more three-dimensional than it was before we started this layer. So I'm going to let this all dry, because it will dry lighter, and then come back and decide if I need to add anything more. I am now going to use some white gouache to see if I can fix my mistake that I've made here. This is obviously not a step that you're going to have to do, but maybe it is of interest to you. So gouache is a water-based medium, like watercolor, but it is more opaque. And we often use gouache for white accents and so on. So It's just a bit like white out really. I'm just going to pass that over and see if I can blot out this mistake. I think that's going to be the best I can do under the circumstances. I'm going to let that dry completely now. And there's the final sketch. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, bye for now.